Bids are in. The gavel is dropped. Ladies and gentlemen, here at WineBid, we are finally hammered. That's right. This is WineBid's podcast, taking all things wine value, wine auction, wine retail, and just wine. With you as always, I am Jeff McGurn on WineBid's marketing team. And joining me today, as he does every time we seem to do this, is Paul Walker, the Prime Minister of Pinotage, our wine expert. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
That's a great one. And I actually congratulate you for the first time. You didn't call me an expert, and you're finally correct. And well, not correct title.
Right. I was trying to be modest on your behalf. You are a wine expert. Thank you for pointing that out.
No, I'm so glad that you didn't mention it.
Paul just pointed out. Paul is a wine expert. He's an expert in wine. We're going to jump right into this because we're doing our wine auction recap episode, and this last auction was crazy. There's a lot to cover, but we're only going to be able to cover wines from the U.S. that were in auction last week. That's it. We can't go to any other region, just the United States. All we can talk about. I'm actually joking, and Paul's laughing because this last week, it was like German extravaganza, like the amount of German wine that was in auction. It was, I'm calling it February Fest. It's not Oktoberfest. This is February Fest. Hopefully every February, this much amazing German wine drops into auction. I mean, the numbers we're seeing here where it's like, okay, top number of bids, right? Let's just talk about the amount of action that happened at this auction. 2020 Julian Hart Piersport Goldtrocken Riesling Cabinet number 22. We had 15 of them. There were 30 bids. This wine started at $50 and hammered at $310. Now, if you had bought 1,000 cases of this,
here comes Jeff.
$50 a bottle.
Totally absurd investment.
You would have
no one should listen to at all because
6x your investment of this wine.
No, it's very fascinating to see Julian Hart wines in auction. I think every single Julian Hart wine that was in last week sold, and I think there were, I can't remember how many lots there were, but there were at least a couple hundred bottles.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they also, not only they all sell, I think they all sell with like multiple bids. Right. That the crazy part of this is there was so much bidding going on with all these wines. Right. So you also had this 2017 Piersporter Goldtrocken Riesling Spätlese. This one, we had 9 of them, 44 trackers, 20 bids, started at 45, ended at $290 a bottle.
Yeah,
so they were like almost all like this. It's
interesting too, because it's one of those wines where in general, I think if you're looking in the secondary market, if you're looking at auctions in general, you're not going to find these wines available elsewhere. Now, I'm not going to make that kind of proclamation about WineBid, but WineBid does feature a lot of German Riesling on a regular basis that kind of sails through the auction, and it's notoriously underrepresented, and people in the trade think that it's never gets its due and never gets its proper appreciation because it's such a complex wine and it's so delicious. And all those things are true. But then every once in a while, something like, a Julian Hart selection comes along and people go absolutely bonkers because they're very difficult to get, especially the quote unquote white label wines, which I've been kind of slowly attempting to educate myself, since I'm not an expert, especially on these wines, about Julian Hart and his apprenticeship with famous growers and vignerons in Germany, and the wines that he's making now. Anyway, it's very, very exciting, very interesting. Again, we should mention that despite all the action for the Keller and the Julian Hart wines, there were still some great deals from other producers in Germany last week that were not crazily expensive, right? Like there were some old mid-90s, I should say, 97 von Schubert cabinets that started at 65 and got bid up to about $74, and so there are sort of more traditional, typical things happening with German wines last week, but the Keller and the Hart wines just went absolutely bonkers. And the Falkenstein wines, which we do mention, I think, because they seem to be coming in relatively often. those went pretty crazy too. There were some cabinets, Alta Riven cabinets from 17 that got, started at 30 and got bid up to 50. So, other producers that aren't maybe super well known, but still have an incredible following. It just did really, really, really well in last week's auction. And it was exciting to see, that amount of Hart and Keller and, von Schubert and Müller-Catoir and Donhoff. And, I don't know which producers we were missing, but probably not too many. At least those that are known. And that have,
Lauer.
Lauer, and those that have the grosser ring auction, selections as well, which is a sort of a further level of rarity and exclusivity. So really, really, really fun stuff last week.
But just to give folks here an idea, like as I look through like our top, let's say 100, top 100 most bid on bottles, right?
Right.
Something like 60 of them are Julian Hart or something like we never see this. And I'm not talking like usually the top bid item will have like 9 bids, 8 bids, right?
Right.
I'm talking like 30 bids, 20 bids, 17 bids, 14 bids. I'm looking like I think you have to go down, I don't know, like 30. You have to go to number 30 before you get below 10 bids. And it's like so much Julian Hart. There's some Keller in there. There are a lot of Julian Hart, though, like a lot of Julian Hart, which is, but see, okay, I think it's worth also mentioning that when we see stuff that gets a lot of bids, right? Because it's really important to know that when we put stuff out at auction, we utilize all the data that we have, in our database over we're almost at 30 years or 28 years of history. And we look and we see like, what do we think this is actually going to sell for? And that's usually what we list it at, right? Which is why the vast majority of items that get put up for auction go for whatever they're listed at, because our data shows us that like, this is what we think it's going to sell for. Now, there are items that do get a bunch of bids, and usually that happens in one of a few cases. Number one, there's like some market correction where, for some reason, everyone's just super into this. Like you'll see like, Wine Spectator Top 100 comes out and this bottle is number one. Okay, yeah, it's gonna get bid up right after that, right? Because there's information market. The other thing that sometimes happen is like what you'll see is we oftentimes see is like this phenomenon. It's 2024. Any bottle that's of a vintage that ends in 4 that is over 20 years of age will get bid up now for for 30th birthdays, 40th birthdays, 50th birthdays, 60th birthdays, 70th birthdays, right? Those get bid up a little bit. But the other thing you see is when, like Paul said, when stuff is super rare, right? And you just do not see it come into auction that often. And Julian Hart is a perfect example of like, if you see it come into auction, it's a bottle or two. Certainly not like 50 cases of Julian Hart, just like, the breadth and the depth where it wasn't like, not only did we see a ton of different lots, but each lot had like multiple bottles, 3, 4.
Yeah, no, it's true. And you're right. Like you say, there's really not a lot of auction data on those wines, especially for, recent release, recent vintages. So the other thing I was going to say, which I did notice, I was kind of poking around. The other thing that can happen is a bidding war. And I noticed, because I always like to look also at the single bottles that get bid up, just the quantity won in a specific lot. And I was like, hold on a minute. Maison Leroy Bourgogne Rouge 09 started at $95 and got bid up to $460. I was like, that's insane. And then I looked in the same auction, there was another bottle that only got bid up to $360. So it's clear that some people were not noticing that there was another bottle available, and they just were going back and forth, on this particular item, not noticing that there was another bottle that they probably potentially could have, also gotten a bidding war with. But that one kind of blew my mind because, the Lawad pricing has been kind of funny for the last, few months. I think some like the 15 to 20-year-old and even older 20, 25-year-old wines from Domaine Leroy have kind of been all over the place. Whereas like this Maison de Bourgogne Rouge, which only sold for, $86 just a couple of years ago, just shot way, way, way up in value, which to me is strange. I understand, like in I think it was in the '04 vintage, a lot of stuff was declassified, and so they're very collectible because there's Grand Cru fruit, in those bottlings. But I don't think we've seen a Bourgogne Rouge from Maison Leroy besides the '04s go for anything close to this. So anyway, that was pretty exciting. So there were other wines that got a lot of attention last week.
Did you see the 2016 Domaine Didier Fonoral Côte de Nuit Village? This one, we had 9 of them, 14 bids, took it from $30 to $70. Oh, well, over 70.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of these actually in last week of these Didier Fonoral ones, which again, we don't ever see. They're extremely rare. And I think if you look at sales history for most of them, I don't think any of them had been in auction prior. I know that 16 Côte de Nuit Village was not, and I was kind of looking at some of the others just to see. But yeah, another super, super rare example. And, these are village wines, right? They're not from Grand Cru sources, but very, very rare and sought after. And I mean, if you think about it, the prices compared to stuff like Maison Leroy Bourgogne Rouge are not that bad. I mean, $85 for, a Côte de Nuit Village from 2012 from Fonoral still doesn't seem like an insane price when you think about it, compared to what some of these other producers are going for. So
I just think it's always good to mention, and of course we're going to say this because it is self-serving because we work for WineBid, but the thing that one of the things that I think is the coolest thing about WineBid is that you get these situations where randomly there will be 600 lots of some of the rarest Riesling on earth that just pop into auction for everyone to buy, stuff that, if you wanted to get some, you would have to wait years on a waiting list to find it. It just does not even come up for purchase. But then, that's why you see these, these bidding wars, because people are having a field day. Because when's the next time we're going to see, 50, 60 lots of Julian Hart come into auction? It's probably a decade.
Not anytime soon. Yeah.
I mean, of course, we say that in next week, there'll be another 1,000 lots of Julian Hart coming down. I mean, it's just not something that happens all that often. So a lot of really cool action on the auction side. Let's run into our heavy hitters, right? I mean,
sure.
Probably not surprising. Top 3 are Domaine Romanée-Conti. We've got 15 Romanée-Conti for 18.4, 15 Latache for 4,510, and then it's 96 Latache for 37.10. So a little bit of a bit more expensive to buy the 15. One that I thought was interesting was this 03 12 bottle lot OWC of Dechem for 34.80. So somebody wanted to grab a bunch of Dechem, maybe for somebody's 21st birthday this year, actually.
Yeah. That's
right? I don't know. Just positing that.
Could be.
I mean, I wish somebody would have gotten me a case of Dechem for my 21st birthday. That would have been pretty awesome.
You have to drink all of it in one sitting.
All of it in one sitting. 15 Mouton, 6 bottle lot OWC, 32.40, and then this 12.
Yeah, that was an interesting one actually, because it sold pretty quickly. It was only in auctions for a couple weeks. It looks like it rolled a couple of times, but yeah, no, that went pretty readily.
That
still a relative deal, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, I think those are a good.
That's not bad. I mean, $5.40 a bottle. It's not. It's it falls into that category of sort of recent vintage Bordeaux. That's not crazy expensive from a great vintage. So yeah, that wasn't a bad deal. 6
liter of 12 Opus 1 for 26.10. I hope it's a nice party bottle right there. And
that's I think maybe we mentioned that, or it was one of our picks.
This 90 Rayas Chateauneuf du Pape had 2 bids, taken from 21.90 to 24.90.
Yeah, it got bid back up a little bit. Kind of interesting to see that. I mean, 90 is a phenomenal year and super, super, super collectible. I think it was in. It's interesting. Last time it was in 2021. It hammered for slightly higher. So. Interesting to see.
And the other one, before we talk about winners and losers, well, not winners and losers, but like this '01 6-liter of Dominus for 20
Yes.
bucks. Did you buy that, Paul? Was that you?
I did not. No, I wish. That would be such a great party bottle, but no, I didn't buy it.
How is
I think for the money, I would buy the Dominus over the Opus, but that's just my personal taste. So,
well, I know you love Dominus, and I'm sure you've had the '01. How is the '01 drinking?
oh yeah, no, it's phenomenal. That'd be a fantastic bottle, absolutely. And large formats too. They're not progressively that much more expensive. So
No, and they'll hold longer, right? So
yeah. Do you see this 2-bottle wood case of Sine Qua Non Sui 2000 hammered at $2,080? It's pretty wild.
yes, yes.
Yeah, that's an old one. I haven't seen that in a while.
Splits. Like 2 splits, right?
Yeah.
And some really, really interesting hammers this week. Let's talk about
sorry. I was just going to say there was some very expensive Hubert Lamy wine, Sancho Bannon last week too, which seems like it's been on a real tear. It looks like 3 of them sold for, what was it? Sorry, 600, 620. Yeah, it looks like 620 for a couple bottles and then 570 for this Derrière Chez Edouard Cuvée Haute Densité. Another wine I kind of want to look up, but it's just exploded, that wine.
Let's talk about some other stuff that's exploded.
Oh yeah.
Let's go back. There were tons of German wine sales records set at this last auction. Keller set we had 4 records set on Keller, 16 Dalsheimer mag for $500. And then 50.
Oh yeah, that was the Grosses Gewachs. Yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, the Grosses Gewachs, the
Ubacher. Yeah, that, and then the G Max sold for 1440 too, which was a lot.
I was like, the only other hammer we saw recently was 1294. So that definitely went up. And then there was a mag of the Niersteiner Pettenhall Riesling Trocken for $900. We didn't see.
2010 as well, so it's got a few years on it. That's a rare one. Yeah.
And the 17 Keller Westhoffen Bühnenhauschen Abst Erde Riesling Trockenbeeren Auslese Gold Capsule split of 375 milliliters for $590.
$590, yeah.
I mean, just like a ton of this. I mean, of course, there are a couple of Julian Hart records, the 19 Richter Auslese for $400. And then the
and Riesling Cabinet Alta Reben number 8 for $690. I mean, that is just wild. That is wild.
Just crazy stuff.
That's got to be one of the white label bottles, I imagine, because again, these are the extra. Yeah, it is this Oligsberg 19 cabinet. Whew, man,
91 Dominus Estate mag.
I was curious about that because I think that I'm going to look at it real quick. Sales of that wine, the 750 has been kind of slowly creeping up. Not going for too much, but we don't see mags in very often, and it's been climbing pretty steadily. 640 a couple years ago, then 800 in 22, and then 870 at the end of last year, and now 975. That's a collectible one because that's I think probably the best wine they ever made. But
really,
yeah, I think it is. I think the 91 is. I don't know. I haven't had it for a couple of years, but it's incredible. It's really, really, really good. So Magnum format is very collectible now.
We've got, let's see, the 04 Gaia Barbaresco 6-bottle lot OWC 2140. And the previous high was 1698. So definitely some movement on Gaia. And 09 Masson Loire Bourgogne Rouge.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about where there was a bidding war, it looked like, on one bottle.
And the bidding war set a record.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up?
Yeah, it's like I was really curious about this Realm, the Phoenix from 2004, hammered for 420. I'm very surprised. I think, again, it's just a super, super rare wine that, I don't know how much was made. I'm really curious, actually. I'm going to ask around. But we've only sold it a couple times and just recently. And then not since 2015, where it went for $55. So that one kind of really caught my eye because older realm, well, I don't know. I feel like we don't really see, 20-year-old realm wines very often. And so that one stuck out to me. We talked about that Sine Qua Non Rosé Sui. I think it's Rosé. I didn't even look at the picture, but I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, for $2,080 for a 2-pack of half bottles, pretty wild. Also a Pagan Poetry Rosé from 2001, half bottle for $400. Another serious hammer there. And yeah, rounding it out, Vega Sicilia Unico, again, still hitting some high hammers for that stuff. 1995, I think last week or the week before, we were talking about older, 40, 50, 60-year-old Vega Sicilia, but this is not tremendously old, almost 30 years for $730. It's pretty serious hammers there. So, and again, I did want to mention, because it keeps getting a lot of action, is Bond, 13 Bond Pluribus hammer for $600. So those older ones are going for more than, it seems like, younger vintages, and then really, really strong vintages like 13 are going for more and more. So that was another one that caught my eye. So
by the way, as we wrap up here, I'll just circle back a little bit. The 04 Realm, the Phoenix, seldom seen, special produced for Realm's list members only. They only made 45 cases.
Well, Realm only ever had a mailing list. They didn't have a winery. So it was probably allocated to, specific mailing list members too, because, I think it was only distributed via mailing list. I don't think it was sold any other way.
I guess it's comprised of wine from Tokalon, Madrona Ranch, and Napanook Vineyard.
Oh, cool.
And then it was not professionally reviewed because it was so limited.
Huh. Well, there you go.
There you go. And with that has been our recap episode for this week of WineBid's Finally Hammered. With you as always, I'm Jeff McGurr, and this is Paul Walker wishing you happy bidding and cheers.
Cheers.